Hi lovelies, it's Claire here, and today's video we are going to be taking a look at 10 myths or misinformation points that are out there about cloth pads. Now, some of these get mentioned quite a bit on Facebook and in cloth communities, etc. And a few of them I've had said to me quite a few times and discussed it with people in person, but I haven't seen much addressing it online. So I figured I would do a video and we would go through some of these points and talk them through. So, number 1 is cloth lightens your period. Now, obviously some people are going to hate me for this one because some women vehemently believe cloth has lightened their period. And it gets talked about a lot. Some sellers even use it as a selling point. I saw one seller the other day that actually specifically wrote that you should buy her cloth pads and change to cloth pads if you have endometriosis, polycystic ovary syndrome, or severely heavy periods and menstrual problems, because cloth will cure it. And I take huge issue with that kind of comment because people who do have these medical conditions are often suffering greatly, and it puts them in a very vulnerable place where they're looking for anything that will help their symptoms, anything that could be that magic cure. And I don't think that should be the way someone comes to cloth. I think people with menstrual issues, I think women with all over, doesn't matter if you've got menstrual issues, no menstrual issues. If you're menstruating, I think you should try cloth. But I don't think you should try cloth because you've been told it's going to do something specific like lighten your period. Now, you still might be saying at your end, well, it lightened my period if you're already using cloth. And the fact of the matter is, there is no chemical in disposable pads that can physically make you bleed more. This is a myth that goes around a lot. It's even on some of those little diagram things that people post up for why you should change to cloth and what's in disposable pads. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of chemicals and things you don't want to put on your lady parts in disposable pads. However, there is not a chemical in pads that can make you physically bleed more than you would naturally. If you actually look at it from a scientific point of view, with your menstrual cycle, basically how it works is in your womb, the lining builds up throughout the first half of the month, waiting for you to release an egg when you ovulate, fertilize it and implant into that lining. If you do not get pregnant that month and no egg implants, then you will move forward into the next part of your cycle, which leads to your period where that lining comes away. So that lining has built up to whatever thickness it has achieved during that part of your cycle, where you have had no contact whatsoever with any disposable pads or cloth pads if you're using cloth pads, that does anything to how that lining builds up. There are factors that can affect that lining and make it thicker or less as it varies each month. Things like stress, hormonal factors, diet, if you're exercising a lot, if you're not exercising a lot, then these things can depend how thick your lining builds up, and that is something that can happen. But that lining is at whatever point it's at when you get to around mid-cycle. And that is the amount of blood you are going to lose during that month's period. So cloth pads can't make less of that lining come away, because that lining has to come away for your reproductive health to be intact. So whatever lining's up there will be coming out. Now, the reason I personally feel people think their periods are lighter when they use cloth pads is because cloth pads firstly absorb differently than a disposable pad. In a disposable pad, the liquid is dispersed in a very specific way into a gel formula that keeps the blood wet in little droplets suspended in the gel. And that's how they make them, so they're not supposed to leak, although they often do. With a cloth pad, it absorbs it, takes it into the core and spreads it differently and more evenly, and then it dries in there, which it cannot do in a disposable pad. Also, depending on your topper, will depend how much of that blood you see on the surface of your pad. If you're using bamboo velour, you are likely to see less blood covering the pad than if you've used something like cotton, where it will spread more before it's absorbed in. Cloth pads also as a whole hold more blood, so you will be able to wear a cloth pad for a longer period of time and do less changes during the day than you would with a disposable pad. So it seems like your period's lighter, because before maybe you had to change your disposable pad every 3 hours and it was completely saturated all over. You changed it every 3 hours and you thought that was quite heavy. Then you changed to cloth pads and you're finding actually you can go 5 hours, and when you change it looks different on the pad. That's just the difference in the pads. Your cycle is not lighter than it was with disposables. So that's that one. There is a logical reason for why it seems like your periods are lighter, but you physically cannot change how much of your uterine lining is up there, because that amount that is there has to come down. Number 2, cloth eliminates thrush. Now here's another one that's probably going to put me in front of the firing squad. It really depends on the cause of your thrush. If you get thrush each month at the time of your period when you're using disposable pads, and towards the end of that period you start to get the itching, you develop a thrush infection, and then you have to treat the thrush, then yes, if you change to cloth pads, it's very likely that those thrush infections will go away, because the cause of your thrush is the fact that you're reacting to either something in the disposables, or you're just reacting to the plastics and the sweatiness of those, and it's sending what's already maybe slightly imbalanced in there out of balance, and then you get a thrush infection. Ellen, can you play in a minute, please? So in that case, it will help or even eliminate your thrush. But if you generally suffer with thrush, either for hereditary reasons, or you have an overgrowth of candida throughout your body, and you are more prone to thrush, and you get it mid-cycle, or you get it at any other point during your cycle, after sex, any of these things, cloth will most likely not have an impact on those thrush infections, because they are not being caused by disposables at the time of your menstrual cycle. So depending on your reason for thrush, they absolutely could help or even eliminate that problem, but they also may not. So I don't like the fact that it's just ballparked that if you suffer with thrush, change to cloth, you'll never have it again. It really depends on the reason and time of the month you're getting your thrush. Number 3, cloth pad smells. Now, people ask me about that all the time. Don't cloth pads smell? You know, disposable smell. Surely cloth pads will smell even worse. And I'm not really sure I get the logic there, because disposable pads are full of plastics and this chemical gel. And like I say, the reason disposable pads smell is because they keep the blood wet. So even once you've taken off your pad, rolled it up and put it in the bin, it's still wet, moist blood in there. And as time goes by, bacteria builds in the wet blood, and that's what gives off the smell. With cloth pads, they actually allow your blood to dry. The majority of cloth pads are natural fibres. Some people like minky and stuff. If you sweat a lot or something, that may not be for you. Or if you're allergic to polyester like me, that probably won't be an option for you. But generally, they're natural fibres. Bamboo velour, cotton tops, flannel tops, this sort of thing. And basically, they absorb the blood, and then the blood will dry within the core of that pad. So where you've got natural fibres and dry blood, once the blood has dried out, it won't smell because bacteria cannot multiply easily on dried blood. So the fact of the matter is, if you take your cloth pad off, you dry store it until your cycle. By the time until your cycle, did I say that? I'm not even sure what I quite said. Until you're ready to wash in your cycle, then that blood will be dry and it won't give off any smells. That's why everyone always says if you're putting it in a wet bag or a bucket, leave the lid ajar or leave the zip open so that air can get in and allow them to dry. If you're wet storing, then obviously you're keeping that blood wet, so you want to make sure that you change your soak water every single day, and that will stop any smells that way. So you are far, far less likely to get any smells with cloth pads compared to disposables, unless you have some kind of infection like bacterial vaginosis, etc., which is a whole different issue and nothing to do with cloth. Number 4 is cloth is unhygienic because blood's going on it, you're washing it, and it's had blood on it. Now, firstly, menstrual blood is not dirty and disgusting. I think it's kind of, we've all been brainwashed a bit by disposable adverts, etc., that, oh, blood's so gross, you need to bleed on our disposable pad and then you need to put it in the bin where you'll never see it again because it's so dirty and disgusting. And that's not actually the case. Menstrual blood that comes out fresh, if you like, to use I can't think of a better word for it, doesn't really have that much bacteria in it. It's as blood, like I said before, as blood stays wet and is open to the air and stuff, that's when bacteria starts to grow. So if you have like a wet disposable pad sitting around, then bacteria is going to grow on it. But fresh blood is not going to give you anything. You cannot catch anything from your own menstrual blood. Unless you have a disease like HIV or something, your family can't catch anything from your fresh menstrual blood. Not that they will be coming into contact with it. So as long as you have a good wash routine, then all that blood is being washed away. Now, my pads I like to keep stain-free because I choose pretty fabrics and I just like that. Some people aren't bothered by stains, but stains are not dirty. There's also this misconception if you've got a stained pad that there's germs in it. There's not. All the blood's gone. It's just the protein in the blood has set a stain on that fabric. And I find the best way to think about it is if you are wearing disposables, disposable tampons, disposable pads, and you bleed a bit on your underwear, or it's nighttime and you've bled on your sheet, you're going to take that sheet off the bed, stain treat it, put it in the wash, and then put it back on your bed. You're not going to throw it away or burn that sheet in the back garden because it's been contaminated by your blood. And it's the same with cloth pads. They're being fully laundered. They're completely clean in between your cycles when you're not using them. So they are not unhygienic. Number 5 is that cloth is high maintenance and not suitable for people with children, busy work lives, and who generally don't have a lot of time on their hands. And I think this comes from the fact that there are some wash routines that are pretty long-winded. But the joy of cloth is you can completely choose how you want to clean your cloth pads. There are some women who find it extremely therapeutic to soak their pads, stain treat their pads, rinse their pads, and then put them in the washing machine. And that's a slightly longer routine. Not as long as you would think, but it is like one of the longest routines. I, on the other hand, because of health issues, I can't stand a sink and soak and rinse and stuff. I do my entire cloth care in the washing machine. So my Oxy cleaner goes in the pre-wash, my detergent goes in the detergent. I had a pre-wash and a rinse plus, and then I put it on 30 and turn it on, and that's my cloth pads. So it's no different than if you're putting on a load of laundry at home. If you've got time to wash your bath towels and your work clothes, then you can just add in an extra machine wash. So it doesn't have to be time consuming. There are so many variations on wash routines out there. I mean, you just look on YouTube, everyone's got a different way of doing it. I've done a video discussing some of the ways you can clean your cloth pads if you're interested in that, and there are tons more on YouTube. So you can really tailor make it for you and what you have time for. Number 6, cloth uses lots of water, so is therefore not eco-friendly. Well, the first part of this is it depends on your wash routine. But either way, even if you're a soaker, generally the people that I've spoken to will only put enough water to cover their cloth pads in the sink or in a bucket. No one is filling huge buckets of water or whole bathtubs of water and chucking their cloth pads in. So very little water is used for soaking. If you're using your machine, I have tons of pads for a cycle because of my endo. So my pads fill a cycle, so they have a cycle themselves. But you can even add your pads in with another wash, a towel wash or an underwear wash. So you don't even have to add another cycle of washing to your monthly, however many washes you do, if you don't want to. So it actually doesn't use that much water. But the second half of this is people assume that because we're using cloth pads, we're using all this water, and they're using disposables, so they're not using any water because they never see any water. They wear the pad, they take off the pad, they put the pad in the bin. But the fact of the matter is it takes gallons of water to manufacture tampons and disposable pads. Gallons. So chances are your disposables that you use in a month have either used the same amount or more water than you would be using with cloth pads. People really forget about the manufacturing process of disposable products, and loads of water is used in that production. So that's just something to think about there. Number 7 is cloth pads are not eco-friendly because the majority of them have a polyester back or use PUL, which is polyurethane laminate, and they do not biodegrade. Now, it is true that a lot of pads have WinPro fleece backing, anti-peel fleece backing, lots of different polyester-based fleeces, or they have hidden PUL or PUL on the back. Now, PUL can biodegrade in certain circumstances where the correct fungus spores are around, but generally doesn't, and polyester fleece does not biodegrade. So how can we say they're eco-friendly? Well, really you have to look at it in the bigger picture. Like everything, you can't just take a disposable pad and a cloth pad and be like, well, they've both got something that doesn't biodegrade. Because the fact of the matter is, if you take how many disposable products you use in 1 month, times that by 12 and then times it by 5, you have got 5 years worth of disposable products, a number that you will most likely use. Now, every single one of those products you have disposed of, as in the name, and they have gone to landfill. Now, if you have a cloth pad stash of 20 or 30 cloth pads, they may contain some polyester or some PUL, but they're being washed and reused every single month for a minimum of 5 years. The average life of a cloth pad, if cared for properly, is 5 years. Often they will last 10, 15 years. I've even spoke to a lady who's 20 years old. But over that minimum time, your polyester and PUL has not ended up in landfill at all, whereas all of those disposables which do not biodegrade have. And then at the end of the life of your cloth pad, many people that use cloth are doing it for eco reasons and are quite crafty, etc. They often get repurposed as like bathtub scrubbers or cut up into little pieces and used as filling for cat and dog beds. There are so many different ways you can repurpose them, so they're still not ending up in landfill. So I don't think anyone should feel bad or criticise people for having fleece or PUL in their pads, because the fact of the matter is you need a pad that's not going to leak. You've got to wear these pads out for the day. You've got to wear them to work. You don't want to be at work and have like blood coming out the back of you. That is just no good. So the product needs to work. But in the grand scale of things, they're not even ending up in landfill compared to all these disposable products that do not biodegrade and end up sitting in landfill or floating around in the ocean. You know, you can't really compare. So that's really a look. That doesn't really come up a lot in groups and things. But I think it is a good one to tackle because you've got to look at the big picture here. So, number 8 is detergent and stain treaters. Now, there seems to be the misconception that if you use stain treaters and detergents on your cloth pads, one, you're still coming into contact with chemicals on your lady parts, and two, you are damaging the environment. So let's go with number 1 and your lady parts being exposed to chemicals. Do you wash your underwear? I'm pretty sure you do. And when you wash it, you put it in the machine with detergent and you wash your underwear. And then you wear it on your lady parts. When you wash your cloth pads, you wash them in the washing machine with your detergent and then you wear them on your lady parts. Your washing machine's job is to take out the excess detergent and things that you're using to wash your pads or your clothing so that it's not in there at the end. And if you are particularly concerned about chemicals and things, then you can actually use plant-based detergents, things like Ecova, Eco Eggs, soap nuts to wash your clothes, which are completely natural and they do not, they do not build up on fabric. So, you know, there's going to be nothing in there, but you really don't have to be concerned because if you're wearing your underwear and you're not having any kind of negative reaction on your lady parts, then you're not going to get a negative reaction from your cloth pads and washing them. The second part is that detergent and stain treaters are bad for the environment. In this day and age, stain treaters and detergents are monitored very strictly. So very, very few on the market has anything that is dangerous to you or dangerous to the environment and marine life. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't some out there. So if you are concerned about that, then like I mentioned previously, you can go for an eco or plant-based alternative detergent that will not harm the environment and that are dermatologically tested to be safe on your skin and don't harm marine life. So the option is there. But it's important as well to remember this doesn't just apply to your cloth pads. If you're thinking about the eco-friendliness of detergent and stain treaters, then you really need to look at your washing as a whole because it's not just pads you're washing in your machine. People seem to really zero in on this with pads, but you're still doing other washing as well. So great if you want to look at eco alternatives and check out what's in your detergent, but do it for your whole washing, not just your cloth pads. Now, if you are interested in what is in detergents, what the chemicals are, what the impacts are on the environment, then I really recommend that you search on YouTube for Amy Nix and check out her soap video. It's over an hour long. She did a great job at doing some amazing research and presenting it, so you can really look into what is actually in these products if it is something that concerns you. So number 9 is cloth is expensive. Now, I've had this said to me a few times of, oh, I've looked into cloth, but it's way too expensive. I could never afford to use cloth pads, so I'm going to carry on with my disposables. So, firstly, if you're planning to buy your cloth pads from makers, yes, it is going to be an investment because, you know, they cost money. There's materials involved that the maker uses, the maker's time is involved. So you are going to have to pay for that product. Now, you can break that up. You don't have to pay it all out at once and get your entire stash. I always recommend getting like one full day, a night, and half a day's worth, because that way you can wear them all day and at night. Then the following morning, wash those ones, and you've got enough until those are dry. So that's a good way you could start your stash slower. Or if you've got enough money to make the investment, you can invest all at once. Although I really wouldn't recommend that until you've tried out different designs and things. I did a video on if you're planning to buy your stash with some great tips there, so you might want to check that one out. But either way, over a long period of time, you've got to think, yes, you're investing this month, but add up how much you spend on disposables for a minimum of 5 years. You can work it out for longer than that, because if you care for your pads, they will last you way past that. It's an initial investment, but over time, you're going to be saving a lot of money. If you can't afford to purchase your pads from makers, then you can actually learn to make them yourself. There's a lot of groups on Facebook. I've done several tutorial videos and information on sewing tips, etc. There's a lot of free patterns out there, and it's a lot cheaper if you buy the materials yourself and sew them up. If you are on an extremely tight budget and you're like, Claire, I don't have money to go and buy bamboo fleece or zorb or something, then you can upcycle and make some really great effective pads from things you have around your house. So don't be put off that cloth pads are really, really expensive to use and it's not going to suit you, because there's many different ways of coming into cloth pads. You don't have to buy from makers on the internet. You can make your own, and you can make them at really, really cheap prices if that's what you need to do. And number 10 is cloth pads can't be used postpartum. Or are you going to have trouble trying to use cloth pads postpartum? Now, with this, I hadn't even really thought about it that much, as I have not had a baby. But one of my friends actually was planning to use cloth pads postpartum, and her midwife voiced concerns because they like to weigh the pads. And this is common practice around, apparently. Quite a few places do weigh them, but some don't weigh them. So it's half and half what you're going to get, I think. I'm not sure how it works in America. But the way she got around it is we weighed all of her cloth pads. We checked with the midwife this would be okay, and she said it was fine. And basically we weighed them. So she chose like different patterns, so she could write down, for example, hedgehogs, and then its weight. And she had a little notebook that she kept in her go bag for when she went into labour that had the names of her cloth pads and how much they weighed, and enough for her hospital stay. So you don't need to weigh your entire stash or anything, just enough for when you're going to be in hospital. So she weighed them before, and then because she had those weights in the little book, when they wanted to weigh them after birth, they just weighed them and compared them to her notepad. And that was easy peasy and done. I have seen concerns about how, you wouldn't even believe it, we get nearly to the end of the video and my camera turns itself off. Oh God, I need a new camera. Anyway, back to where we was at. So hygienic postpartum pads. Now, there seems to be like some midwives who don't know very much about cloth pads, worry they're unhygienic. Some women worry about if they're hygienic or not. My friend who spoke to her midwife was actually really on board with it once they got the weight thing down. And they talked about hygiene, and she said they would, in her opinion, be more hygienic. And I tend to agree, because postpartum, you're going to be sore. You could have had to have stitches and episiotomy, things are going on down there. So the last thing you want to do is put on a scratchy plastic disposable postpartum nappy type pad. So firstly, from a comfort point of view, cloth pads are much better. but also they don't contain any of those nasty chemicals. They don't contain any of that nasty gel. So if anything, you are less likely to have bacteria hanging around down there. You know, if you get hot and sweaty wearing a disposable, bacteria is going to breed really easily. If you've got cloth there, it's breathable. It's going to be able to absorb. It's going to be much better for you. So in my personal opinion, I feel they're much more hygienic. From the midwife's perspective, she found they were hygienic. I think when concerns are raised about this, Ellen, can you just wait a minute? When concerns are raised about this by healthcare professionals, it's because they don't know anything about cloth and are uneducated in it. So I have spoken personally to loads of women who have used cloth pads postpartum. In the groups I'm in, women are always making postpartum pads. So really, I think obviously do your own research because that's important to you. And if you have trouble with your midwife, remember it is your decision and they have to go with what you say. As with anything in labour and birth, it is the woman's decision. It's not the healthcare practitioner's decision. And maybe try and educate them because they maybe come out the other side of it knowing a little more. And next time they're faced with the same thing, they'll be more up on it. So as far as postpartum pads go with cloth, I don't see any reason. I did do some research because obviously, like I say, I have not been through postpartum bleeding myself. So I did speak to quite a few people and did some research online. And there is no reason that I could find through research or speaking to my friend and some women online that have used them postpartum that they would not be suitable or that you would be any more prone to infection. If anything, from what I've found research-wise, you would be less prone. Ellen! So yeah, go ahead and use them postpartum. So I hope you have enjoyed this video. Again, sorry for the awkward edit that's going to be in it, thanks to my camera. I'm going to be angry with that now for the rest of the day. But if you have enjoyed this video, please subscribe and give it a thumbs up. And I will speak to you soon.